All right, welcome back to Two Recruiters. We took a bit of a hiatus.
A little bit. A lot of things going on.
Yeah, lots and lots of things. So welcome back to all the our wonderful audience, and we are super glad to be back. But like we said, we just took a couple months off to reflect on a couple different things. But we're super excited to be back. So today we actually interviewed the CIO of Vystar Credit Union, Lisa Cochran. She's not related to me, so I do get that question, but nope, I've got an E on the end. So this is really like the first time that you and I have ever had a chance to sit down with Lisa.
Right, outside of just being with her and gossiping at networking events.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting because when we came up with this, the idea and the list of people that we wanted to target specifically in Jacksonville, Lisa was on that short list, of course. So we were really, really excited to finally have an opportunity to sit down. But anyway, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and kick this off with the CIO of Vystar, with Lisa. Thank you. Awesome. So Lisa Cochran, thank you so much for coming on with us today. How you doing?
I am doing well, and I am so glad to be here.
Awesome. We are very glad to have you. So usually how we kind of kick this off, really start with the really beginning of Lisa Cochran, where you were born and, you know, what you did, and kind of just tell us the story.
Yeah. All right. It's, I think it's an interesting story, but definitely a different story than a lot of people. But I was born in 1971. I reconciled the fact that I can admit my age. So I was born in 1971.
You look great.
Oh, thank you. I try to be like Benjamin Button.
Yeah, age backwards.
Age backwards.
Right.
That's my mission in life.
There you go.
And you're only as old as you let
feel.
yourself feel, and
Totally true.
And you behave. And so, sometimes I'm a teenager, but
hey,
just
we all are.
How it goes. But so I was born in 1971 on August 29th, the day before my father's first day of his senior year of high school. My mother wasn't allowed to go to high school. I mean, she had a newborn, so that would have been a barrier. But in 1971, if you were married, they were married. They got married July 29th. I like to say it was 8 months premature. But in 1971, if you were a married woman with a baby, or even if you weren't married and had a baby, you weren't allowed to go into the public high school because they didn't want you there because you were a bad influence. And in 1972, Title IX was actually amended, and the amendment to Title IX said that you couldn't restrict people from going to school if you're getting public funds for those reasons. But I was born in 1971, so that was not the case. And so I like to talk about resiliency, and that's just part of who I am. That's made me resilient because, my parents had to be resilient because that's how they got their start in young adulthood. They weren't even adults; they were children.
Right. Growing up together.
Yeah. And so in some ways, I think I was the adult. I think that's why I'm so silly and goofy now. I can finally be a kid.
Back. The Benjamin Button, right?
Exactly. So that was my start in life. I talk about resiliency, and one of the things I like to do is inspire people to get into STEM, and there's diversity challenges in STEM, and so I like to talk to people that maybe don't have a start to life that they think gives them advantages, and tell that story, because I think it's a story that I like to show. If you want to have a job like mine someday, you absolutely can.
Right. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
I didn't have my first kid until I was 30, and I still don't have any idea what I'm doing. So
right. We're still figuring it out.
I can't even imagine your parents and having a child at 17.
Yeah.
I mean,
and their senior year in high school.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. So my dad went to school during the day, and my mom worked at the Dairy Queen. And
DQ.
They started out living in my grandparents' basement. My dad's mom and dad's house.
And what state is this?
This is in Nebraska.
Nebraska. Okay.
It's in Sydney, Nebraska. And then my dad, he worked for a guy who had a carpet store and did flooring. And so after school, my dad would work with him, sort of as an apprentice to learn how to lay carpet and lay tile. And so then when he graduated from high school, that's what he did.
Okay. So did he go to college? Or, sorry. Did he
no.
Go to, no, he just did that,
neither of my parents went to college. My mom always wanted to go to college, so,
right.
What she really wanted for me was to, go to college and kind of do the things that she wasn't able to do because of, the circumstance of life. But I'm, really proud of my parents, and they're the ones who really showed me resiliency. By the time they retired, they owned 5 businesses in the town that I grew up in. Started at, and they didn't even acquire their first business until they were 50. And so, when people act like 50 is old, I'm like, I'm going to live to be 104. So I'm not even halfway there yet.
And you went to Embry-Riddle.
I did.
Right?
Yep.
So kind of talk to me about that journey. Like why Embry-Riddle? What drew you to that school over other ones?
I wish it was
it's not near Nebraska.
It's not near Nebraska. That was like one of the things that drew me to
Got to get out of the state. Check. Yeah.
I took the PSAT tests, and there was a question on there like, do you want to receive solicitation from colleges? And I checked yes. And back then there wasn't email and things like that. You just got
hardcore mail in the
and I saved
your little mailbox outside by the street.
Yeah, so I saved every single one of those things I got, and I read them all. And I had a stack. It was probably 2 feet high that I kept in my room under the window of all of the colleges that had sent me information about their school, and they were all over the country, and they have these beautiful layouts of what the campus looked like and what they study there. And then I got one from Daytona Beach from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University.
It's like just read beach.
Yeah.
Like, beach. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, that was like beach was part of the hook. And then they had a computer science program, and it specialized in aviation, which sounded really cool. And
it's a good school.
Yeah.
It was a really good school.
It was a good school, and the ratio of guys to girls was like 16-1. Yeah. I didn't realize that wasn't, it was an engineering school. So, anyway. But that was the.
You need to say no more. You need to say no more.
You got it. I think if I remember correctly, you worked for Lockheed, right? Is that kind of where you went?
I did. So
you started in the government world, like right out of that. Okay.
Well, my senior year, I did an internship for 6 months in Connecticut at Pratt & Whitney, where they make airplane engines. And I worked on a inventory system for their parts. But it was a really cool experience because, I don't know if you know this, but there's bird ingestion problems when you're flying.
I've heard about it.
And so they have these big engines that they buy dead chickens from Mexico, because I think you can't buy dead chickens in the U.S. So they buy
that's news to me.
Chickens from Mexico, and they shoot them into the engine.
This whole Mexican black market. Got to sell these chickens, so sell them to Connecticut.
Yeah, so I got to see bird ingestion testing of the engines, which was really cool. And they had this is in. I don't know what they do now. Maybe they use simulators, or I don't know if they still do old school, buy the chickens and test
just for
them.
the fun of it. Now it's like, hey, we got all these chickens, we got to do something. It's Saturday afternoon,
right?
Let's go chuck them at a jet engine.
Wow.
Yeah. So I had that experience on my resume, and then I went to Lockheed Martin and worked there on the Aegis program.
Okay.
So, Aegis, it's a integrated system on ships to coordinate, the missile system and the spy system and guns, and they all work together through, automation. Now it probably could be considered early artificial intelligence, because people in those roles trying to react the way that they need to inputs would be a lot slower than how those systems are able to operate. And that was my first programming job.
Wow. So, and what language was that in? What were you working with at that point?
Pascal.
Pascal.
Pascal, wow. I worked first on it was called the Access Control Program, and it was used to simulate some of the stuff before it was actually on the ship. And then after that, I worked on a different team and was the lead on the operational readiness and test system on the front end of that. And so that was a UI user interface, and that was in.
Oh, so you got into the front end.
That was in Motif. So
wow. So then from there, how did you get into the whole fintech financial servicing business? Like what? Because that seems totally opposite to me. So
So I was working at Lockheed Martin, and a recruiter called me.
The recruiters.
The recruiters. I
Darn
know.
I know. We're so bad.
Like my whole career is like tied to recruiters. Like,
hey, so ours.
I get that.
Yeah.
But there was a credit card company called MBNA in Delaware, and they were growing, and so I went to this commercial company and saw how fancy the offices were.
Right.
When I was sitting and going to this like big fancy shiny object, like at MBNA, they were all about think of yourself as a customer and like, how you present yourself matters. They had little stripes on the wall. They would like touch up the stripes, like just, to make, because, appearances and how you present yourself and impressions matter. And so that's what lured me in.
Drew you in.
Yeah. And that's how I ended up in financial services.
So tell us a little bit about how you came into Vystar, came into Jacksonville, and give us that story.
Yeah, called me when I was working at a global bank, and at first I was like, I have this big important job at a global bank. I had more people working for me than are employed by Vystar. I wasn't sure I was interested, but it was in the middle of the pandemic. I was sitting in front of a Zoom camera from 7 a.m. until sometimes 10 p.m. And I missed people. And I did a Zoom interview, I think, with Brian, the CEO, and then one with Chad. And then that was at the end of 2020. And 2021, I was going to come in for an in-person interview because even though we were still in the middle of the pandemic, they were based here, and there were people that still went into the office if they chose to. And then I got COVID, so then that got pushed back further. And I finally went in for an interview, and I loved it. I loved the headquarters. I didn't go to their former headquarters, but if you've been to Vystar's headquarters,
the new one's amazing.
Yeah, and the top floors are made for the people.
It's like Dave and Buster's. It's literally like Dave and Buster's.
I actually have not been there yet, but I hear it's pretty phenomenal.
It's awesome.
They have
pinball machines,
Star Wars pinball. That was pretty much what sold me. But
to each its own, right? We all got it. Yeah, that's great.
I was on the fence, but then when I saw that pinball machine, where do I sign? Where do I sign?
Yeah, and the people I work with are so authentic. I'm in meetings when we're in meetings talking about business strategy. Brian, authentically says, and he means it from his heart, hey, if we earn more money, we can give back more to the community. We can lower fees for members. And that's who he is as a person. And so sometimes I describe my job. I don't know if either of you, one of you have ever seen an eclipse, a partial eclipse versus a total eclipse. Mm-hmm. It's the difference of, wow, that's really cool, versus a total eclipse, which is just, like awe-inspiring, like
mind-blowing,
renders you speechless. Yeah. And, for me, that's the difference between jobs I loved, because I've loved all the jobs that I've had, and where I am now, where I feel like it's, this utopian place where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah. So every day you wake up with that same enthusiasm that you had on day one.
Yeah,
or even in that interview process.
It was total eclipse of the heart.
Exactly.
Oh, wow. No comment on that. But it's a good one. Yeah, I'll give you that.
But there are some days that it's hard, and there's we're humans. Like, we don't always get along on everything. But when you have people who allow you to be your authentic self and show up as their authentic selves and aren't worried about all of those types of things, you can do amazing work together.
Let's go into resiliency, right? So we talked about that before, and obviously with your parents being resilient and teaching that and passing that on to you, I do think based on everything that happened across the globe last Friday, this is a really good time to talk about that and to talk about the things that you've learned and what kind of advice you would give to a future leader, future manager, really anyone.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't really matter who you are. You could be an intern.
Yeah.
How do you have to do that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you can't be in IT without having failures. It's like, I wish you could, but you can't. So, people that were, making condescending remarks online or implying that somebody did something dumb, there's a lot of comments like, oh, they must not have tested. Like, I guarantee that there was like like something went wrong that they're going to put guardrails around so it doesn't go wrong again. But, there's a lot of people that make a lot of assumptions in the absence of information, and it's not bad logic, but it's flawed logic.
Right.
And so, I think the first thing I would say is you have to kind of get over yourself. Like, things are going to happen, and like, how are you going to prepare for a worst case scenario to bounce back from that? And for me, what's always gotten me through hard times is visualizing what it's like on the other side and the lemonade that can come from the lemons that you're in the middle of right now.
Yep. So for a future leader, for a person like that's maybe wanting to be an IT manager, or not even really technology, maybe someone that even just wants to be a manager and take over a team, what kind of advice would you give them?
Well, I was a project manager. I couldn't wait to be a manager. I'm like, I want to be a manager. You have to understand what comes with that. And I think whether you're a manager or just really any job that you do, having an outward mindset where you understand where the other person is coming from versus how is this impacting me? Whenever I do that, I make much better decisions and I'm a much better leader, and I'm much more empathetic to what's going on around me, and then I'm much more effective in anything that I'm trying to do. So, I think as a manager, you can't. I mean, people will follow a manager that threatens them and rules with an iron fist to get things done, but they won't want to work for you forever. So it might be effective in the short term. It's not effective in the long term.
Yeah, I had somebody tell me one time, a long time ago, that managers have subordinates and leaders have followers. And so that always really resonated with me. Just to your point, you can get things done if you are managing with an iron fist, or, Israel and I have come from the whole recruiting background and sales background, and, that's all metrics driven. So it's always about numbers. It's all about what you did today and what you're going to do tomorrow. And what have you done for me lately? I can't tell you how many times I've had a manager tell me that. Like, if I had a great day yesterday, does not matter. This is a new day. But it's those people that, like you said, manage with empathy, manage with understanding. I also had a manager tell me one time that, my self-interest has to has to match your self-interest. And there's not a lot of people that have that, right? They're managing with their own self-interest, and then you just have to do what they're told, right? So that doesn't always work. So I think that's great. How have you been able to kind of convince them that this is what to do? Because a lot of people will default to, oh, well, they're my friend. They're going to do what I ask them to do. But then if they're not, like, how can you kind of get everybody behind one vision or one mission? Because I know that's also, as a leader, that's one of the most difficult things to do if someone's not actually bought in, especially on IT.
Yeah. I think change is so hard. And my organization has gone through a lot of transformation over the last couple of years. We're a growing credit union, and so we're more heavily regulated than we were in the past. We have a larger number of members who have higher expectations of system availability. And so there's been a lot of processes that have had to change around how we do change, when we do change, all of those things. And change is hard. I try to be very honest with them about what's negotiable and what's not. And that if they want to work at an organization where you can make changes in the middle of the day that may bring a system down, then that's probably not where they want. There's nothing wrong with that, but they're not going to be able to achieve their career objectives here. And how can I help them get to where they want to go? And so being supportive and making sure what people want, there's nothing wrong with wanting that kind of job. Like, but that job doesn't exist here anymore. Like, how can I help you find it? And I think, again,
and that's really tough too. We talked a little bit, one of our previous guests, Michael from RF Smart, we talked a lot about that with him. It's like, sometimes you just realize as a leader, I'm leading someone that is not really being effective in the role that they're in. How can I help them maybe uncover what can make them effective? And in that example, if you remember Israel, it was an individual that just was I think he was in sales. Yeah. He was struggling because he really didn't like what he was doing. And Michael came to him and did end up letting him go. And now he's in real estate and doing great, and he's really happy. But he would have never been in that situation had something like that not happened. So to your point, you got to work with them on that.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, I'm at a place now where we don't do a lot of job reduction, but I worked at some large organizations where every 6 to 12 months we were letting people go. So I've had a lot of hard conversations with people telling them that their job was eliminated. And, any manager that enjoys that conversation or doesn't think that conversation is hard shouldn't be a manager, because you're impacting somebody's life and it should be a hard conversation. But,
so true. It's funny. I was talking to someone else about this like a week ago that I remember when I was at Black Knight and I was on a program, like very similar when Israel was there too. And I was a program manager. I had interviewed all the managers, and they'd said what they hated most was hiring and what they hated most was firing. And to your point, that's good, because that is a good manager. If a manager likes firing, whew.
Right. But the one thing I've observed from almost everybody, because I stay connected and I see how people end up on the other side. And it used to really, really bother me. And like I said, it's still a hard conversation. But a lot of times people are so afraid of change. They're in jobs that they don't like to do. And when you're doing a job you don't like to do, you don't do a good job doing that job. And so I've seen, there was one woman that worked for me years ago that was running testing for my team. And there was a lot of challenges with the organization. And eventually her job got eliminated, and she started an alpaca farm in like the mountains in Arizona, and she is happy. And it was a catalyst for her to go find her happy. And so
it's a very hard decision. And I can even say that personally when you're thrown into a bucket, right? Like as a testing manager,
right.
Stereotypically, people look at you as, oh, you're a QA manager. You have to stay in that, right? And then those are the only, as a recruiter, I'm not going to call you to start a farm. I'm going to call you to be a tester, or call me and Israel to be a salesperson. And maybe we don't necessarily like that, or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's just, you're always thrown into that bucket. And I think so many people get caught up in that, and then they just stay there. And to your point, they might not be doing the best job that they can, but they're just collecting the paycheck and
right. I mean, I think it's coasting. So easy to get into a fixed mindset of this is who I am, and I wish I would have done this years ago, but I can't now. But the truth is, you can. And I was meeting with our interns yesterday, and they were like, I don't know what to do. Like I don't know what part of IT to go in, because it's going to be like what I do. And I'm like, well, it's going to be what you do next, but it doesn't mean it's going to be what you do forever. And it was really interesting. One of our interns is a chemistry major that was doing an internship in advanced analytics, and I was like, wow, like how? And she goes to Johns Hopkins, and I'm like, wow, that's got like an amazing experience. It might not be like lined up with what you want to do long term, but like getting different types of experience, whatever it is like amazing.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I think that, I mean, again, the thing that we always talk about here is like, I personally feel challenging yourself into a new venture is completely critical. And when I talk to interns in college, and even my own daughters now, to your point, what you do right out of college, what you do in your first career, I'm not doing, well, actually I kind of am other than this podcast, but I have done a lot of different things. I think both Israel and we all have done a lot of different things.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And, I think it keeps you young, it keeps your mind young to do things that are scary and hard. I overly enthusiastically rented a cabin on a lake that you have to get to by a boat, and I don't drive a boat. So I had to go take a boat driving lesson last week so I can go on my vacation on Saturday so I can get to the place that I'm staying.
Absolutely amazing.
It was scary, but it was also something new. And, I think it actually works part of your brain that actually there's scientific proof that it does keep you young to do things that are outside your comfort zone.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. You got to find the comfort in being uncomfortable. And I know that's challenging. What advice would you give well, as we know, right, there's not a lot of women in technology that are kind of focused on this, right? It's a male-dominated field. So can you talk to me a little bit about what advice that you would give an individual trying to go into technology, kind of think about that, and then how to really break that ceiling, right? Because it is male-dominated, and we all know that. So it was just something I'm always kidding. I definitely want to share this with my daughters because I tell them all the time to go into technology. They have absolutely no interest in doing what we do. Absolutely not. If the one thing that my daughters actually like is the podcast idea, that's about it. But when we start talking to technology, they could care less.
And, I think, well, it starts with, it almost starts with parents and sort of the biases that they create around what boys are good at and girls are good at. And it's interesting. Some countries don't have those same biases around math and science. And so girls perform equally as well in math and science all the way through high school in those countries, where here you start to see, that bifurcation sort of even when they're young. I remember taking my son when he was 3 or 4 to camps that had robots and things, and it would be all boys. And, there's one little girl, and the mother of the little girl said, oh, she's weird because she likes this kind of thing. And I'm like, no, she's not weird. She's normal. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's, sort of just, we don't do it on purpose, but people just have that mindset. And so I think
it's consciously biased, which it could be unconsciously is what it should be.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And so, that's one of the reasons that I like to go talk about, my story of resilience. And I'll talk about, I don't think I brought it up with you guys, but, there was a decision I made once that the CIO said, oh, that's Lisa's Gigaspaces issue that was in the Charlotte Observer about why Bank of America was down for a couple hours one day. I've had failures and I've made decisions and learned from them, but I like to talk about where I came from and those things that happened along my career, because I want everybody to realize that if they want to be like me, have a job like mine someday, they can. They don't have to come from a background that they went to the best school and had the best education and had assets that I didn't have growing up. They just have to believe that they can.
Yep.
And I think helping somebody believe that they can is part of that is being able for whoever it is to see something in common with you. And I think, that's an important thing I wish more people would do, is even if they're different from somebody or have very different opinions or beliefs, that they would try to just understand why the person thinks the way they do or why they believe the things that they do, because, I think you can find something in common and relatable with anybody.
Most likely will. Right. And that's another one of our guests, Dr. Bob, talked a lot about that. And you learning through listening. And so I think it's a really big, to your point, just because I don't always agree with you, even as a leader or a parent or a friend, doesn't necessarily mean that I can't seek some kind of common middle of the road that we can also do. And then also, to your point too, to really build them up and to help them and support them and understand that they can do really whatever they want to do, right? I mean, we've all grown up with that kind of same, parents telling me, you can do whatever you want to do. You can do it. And sometimes you don't believe that, right? And sometimes you do get defeated. Like to your point too, you make mistakes. I would actually argue that if you're not making mistakes, then you're really not learning anything, because you should be making mistakes all the time, but it's what you do with it and how it's post mistake. Did I learn from it? Am I going in a different direction? Yeah. Am I not repeating the same mistake and then expecting a different result? Mm-hmm. What, Albert Einstein, right? Isn't that the definition of insanity is what he said? Yeah.
But also I think when you find your passion, whatever that is, and then within that passion, you make a mistake. And if you decide after that mistake that you don't want to continue down that path, then really what you're telling yourself is maybe this wasn't my true passion, because I'm not hungry enough to continue to figure this out. It was like, oh, well, and then on the flip side, in regards to, I don't think just this is little girls in technology or boys and whatever. I think really it comes down to who are their mentors, whether it's a parent, a coach, whatever. It's when that child is vulnerable enough to say, I'm passionate about this. It's that mentor's responsibility to not respond with, that's a dumb passion.
Right.
Why would you do that? No, you should do this. And so, and then even in what Pete said, where like I've told my girls they should really get into IT, and they respond with, no. And that's fine, because that's not their passion. And but I think where so many people get it wrong, and where we're at this day and age where there are so many opportunities to do so many things, and there's so much access to knowledge out there. Like never before have anybody ever been able to just, oh, I'm interested in this maybe, and then it puts them on this path, and it's just a Google search where they're like, hours and hours of opportunity to learn. But then it goes back to them being vulnerable to be like, oh, I learned this today, or I discovered this, and I really think that this might be the trajectory that I want to look at. And then that mentor to come back and be like, no, that's stupid. And I think that's really the crux of where we as leaders, mentors, parents, as we grow and learn, we need to be on the side of accepting the fact that someone's even vulnerable to tell us what their passion is. Right. And to then encourage them, support that passion, because also that passion might just take one mistake and then they realize, you know what, that's not my passion. I gave it a go, but I realized that I'm not truly, because your brain is evolving until your brain doesn't stop growing until you're 26. So like there's lots of time, and then you might be, 32 after your brain's completed. And it's like, you know what? I do want to farm alpacas. I don't want to be an automated engineer. Who cares about testing?
Right.
Anyway, yes. That was long-winded.
I think, people are living, well, there's like mixed science, I think, on longevity and how long people are living. I'm going to live to be 104, at least, maybe 124, because the science is evolving. And, my goal is when I die at 104, like people are going to be like, wow, she died too young, because, I want to live to my fullest. And there's a lot of things that can happen between now and then. And so, I like to tell people, like, you can have multiple careers. My parents, they bought their first business when they were 50. And so by the time they retired, they owned 5 businesses. But that was like after they were 50. And then, so when I hear or see people in their 30s or 40s or 50s talking about they're old and it's too late to do something, it's not.
Yeah, and the average time when you're 45 years old, that's when you truly find like that's the thing that's going to make you, isn't it like, I don't know. And again, keep me honest, both of you. I think I read one time that most millionaires or billionaires made their money after they were 45 years old. So everything leading up to this is just building, and they usually were doing something that they've never done before. And it's still, I do believe this. So
I was talking to somebody who had a couple of startups that he sold and did really well. And I said, oh, well, have you ever had any fail? And he's like, yeah, but I don't talk about those. But there was one, because when you go work at a startup, a lot of times you take no salary or very small salary and it's all banking on it selling. And he's like, I worked at one for like 2 years and I only got $15,000 when it sold. And that was because I had a better contract. There's some people that got nothing.
Oh, yeah. I would much rather hear the story of the failed startup.
That's exactly what I said. I said, if you want it, that's fine if you want to keep it to yourself because you want to capitalize on all the startups, but there's probably enough startups to go around. And as a mentor, how powerful would it be if you told those stories of failure as much as you told the stories of success?
So years ago, talking about failed startups, one of the startup ideas that me and a couple of friends had were, because all startups have T-shirts. I've never seen a startup that does not have a really, really cool T-shirt.
It's socks now.
Yeah, it is true. It's socks and T-shirts. Yes, that's true. I have heard about the socks, but we were going to create an Etsy page of failed startup tees. And that was it. We were just going to sell and I actually was a part of a lot of them that were all failing. And that's, I think, mistake number one is buying T-shirts of a business that's never going to get off the ground. So that's probably number one rule to not do.
But it's a write-off. So,
But it is true. Yeah, I would, if someone would come to me and say, yeah, I created Uber, but let's talk about all the other 50 startups that I completely failed at miserably and why we did what we did, I would pay thousands of dollars for that ticket just to actually hear that because that's more of a learning experience.
Right. Because I like to call, because I've been part of my own number of, let's call them failed experiments. But I don't like to call them failures. I like to call them learning opportunities. Because it's when you use the word failed, it's like, okay, well, I didn't fail because I came out knowing something. I learned something. If I failed something, it means I did not pass. I was an F. I didn't study. I didn't learn anything, and therefore F. So with my learning opportunities in startups, the startup never got off the ground. But what did I learn from that? Let's say failure. Yes, it was a failure, but it's just because it didn't make any money. But it wasn't a failure because this is what I gained in business knowledge and business acumen or technical acumen in now putting what I've learned towards my next venture. So I think that there's a lot of to the individual that you're speaking of. I would love for him to talk about all the things that he learned before. And then if he's said that he's sold 3 now, obviously he figured it out.
Right.
But prior to that, so you're saying that, you figured it out.
Yeah, and I would actually
you repeated it.
Yeah. And I would even argue that the 3 that he sold probably had different learnings every single time. So it was like, what I did this way is not the cookie cut way. I did it that way. So it's like, oh, that would be phenomenal. You can invite him on the podcast.
Okay. Well, he's very interesting. He'd be a great podcast interviewee. I think we use failure to, we talk about failed relationships, failed this, failed that. Like, they're learning opportunities. Like, not everything is supposed to be in your life forever. Like, but it served its purpose, and you can be grateful for whatever it was for the time it was there, and just release it and let it go and move on.
I learned so much from my first marriage.
It wasn't a failure. It was a learned experience.
Right. I mean, that's what we do. We learn, I think, we compare ourselves to other people. I was talking to someone else and they were saying, they were comparing me and my success to where they were in life, but like they had traveled Europe after they graduated from college and then had tried to be a musician in California and then worked as a crewman on a yacht for a year and is still very successful as a business leader today. So they might not be a chief anything, but they have like this amazing experience that I'm like, oh, wow, I have to do that now when I'm like 70 because I didn't do it when I was 20.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So it's there. They define success different than the way you do it. And so it's still the same. It's still.
Right. But, from a comparison standpoint, they're seeing like, oh, I made these choices that were bad. And so now I'm not where I need to be. I'm like, no, that's to me, that's like fascinating and interesting and makes you more of an interesting person. And, I I love what I'm doing now, but I look forward to,
doing that
right. Someday when I decide I don't want to work anymore.
Yeah. Right. Well, so I know we're coming up on time. So final takeaways, Lisa. So we talked a lot about resiliency and even startups, learning experiences and learning opportunities and everything else. You being in Jacksonville and some things that a lot of the big focus that this particular subset of interviews are going to be is really around the future of the technology here in Jacksonville. So you being here now, right, and being part of the CIO Council with our good friend Craig Pachanik. Big shout out to you, Craig. Good friend of mine. What do you think the future of Jacksonville holds for the technology market?
Yeah, I think it's a thriving market. I think there's a lot of good things to come for Jacksonville. And, we have universities that are expanding programs or coming to Jacksonville to expand programs and bring Master of Science degrees that are in the fintech or tech space. We have corporations moving in, and then we just have people that get to work remotely that just want to live in Jacksonville. So there's a thriving technology community in Jacksonville, which I think is exciting. I'm a person of, you can have a mindset of, that's going to bring competition and they'll take my talent. But I've always been of the mindset, hey, if I grow great talent and they go on and are successful somewhere else and they feel supported in that, then people are going to attract and want to work with me. And so I think it's great that we have this thriving community of technology in Jacksonville.
Mm-hmm. I totally, both Israel and I agree. It's I haven't seen the market like this in, I would argue, maybe 10 years. And I think the community's kind of getting back together a lot more. 2013, 2014 was maybe the last time that I saw the startup scene kind of being more together. More people the conferences are starting to come back. The events are starting to come back. Everybody seems to be much more inclusive this time. Whereas I think Jacksonville's always been fairly guilty of being pockets.
Stay in your lane.
Right. Yeah. Pockets of this and pockets. And I mean, here we are with the second part of this interview down in Nocatee at the Link. So this is a new studio for us. It's the same one that we did before, but it's awesome that we get invited down here. So St. Johns County, Ponte Vedra Beach, to Jacksonville, to downtown, to San Marco. It doesn't really matter where it is. So I'm glad to hear you feel the same way. And so Vystar is obviously incredibly supportive of that. So that's just great as well.
Yeah. When I moved here in Jacksonville in 2017, I remember talking to recruiters and saying how hard it was to get people to move to Jacksonville.
Oh yeah,
for jobs that were based in Jacksonville, and
we were there trying to recruit everybody here, and no one was paying attention to us.
Yeah. And I remember somebody saying like, but once they get here, they love it and they don't want to leave. It's just getting them here. And I think, maybe people figure it out. Like, and for me, it hasn't been as hard to recruit people and have them willing to move to Jacksonville.
No, I mean, so many people are moving to Florida. I think the pandemic changed that dramatically, right? So everybody's leaving everywhere to go to Texas or Florida, right? So, but I used to say when I was younger, I would think that if you're driving down 95, you pass through Jacksonville, maybe stop at a gas station, and you just keep driving. So it's nice to actually finally see people stop and go, oh, maybe I could live here. This sounds pretty cool. I mean, obviously with Nocatee being, what did you say, Israel, the number one place to move?
The number one place to live in Florida. It's in the top 3 places to live in the nation for like the third year in a row.
Which is crazy. So it's crazy to think of. So I hope those that are listening to this do think about, coming down here. We would love to have you. But yeah, so thank you so much, Lisa, for being here. It's always great to see you. And we look forward to getting this out to our listeners.
Yes. And for those in Jacksonville or following Jacksonville, go Jaguars.
Go Jags.
There you go.
This episode's been sponsored by some friends of ours
Good friends.
Former colleagues, Interactive Resources. Pete, tell me a little bit about Interactive Resources.
Well, thank you. Thank you for asking. No, Interactive Resources, I believe they started in 2006 in Jacksonville, and I was a previous partner of theirs for a number of years, I think close to 6 or 7. Big fans of them, great organization. If you're looking for work within the IT sector, professional sector, or even industrial, feel free to give them a call. They'll take care of you. Either, now that we're all everywhere, right, post-pandemic, if you're looking for work anywhere, I would definitely call those guys.
Reach out to Interactive Resources. And then big news that Pete and I...
Gigantic news.
Very excited about.
I'm getting giddy, as Michael Morales said on a previous episode.
At the end of August, August 26th and 27th,
those are the dates.
A brainchild of Pete and mine is coming to fruition. Society of Technology Explorers. And
little Wes Anderson play.
Yeah. It's Pete. Tell us a little bit about the society.
Everybody gets a badge. No, so we just like Israel said, this is a brainchild of ours. We've been thinking about this for quite a while. We got roped into a larger conversation, which is really exciting for me because this is one of the first times that I've felt that Jacksonville, the tech scene and tech community has really come together. And so Israel and I are kicking off what's called Jacksonville Tech Fest, which is going to include the Tech Coast Conference that the Chamber puts on. And then also Friday, our good friend Kelly Dyer,
Love Kelly.
Views, yes, who doesn't, he's going to do his summer social that he's done for a number of years now. So that'll close it out on Friday. But Monday and Tuesday are Swanson's and I like brainchild.
We're kicking it off.
We've been recruiting some amazing speakers that are actually going to be headlining this. In fact, this episode with Lisa Cochran, she's going to be closing Monday night. So we're really excited to have Lisa do that. But then also, if the previous episode, if you guys had a chance to listen to it with Matt Chang, Tuesday afternoon is all Matt. Everything that Matt has built with his team, his company, his connections,
his gray matter,
his gray matter. That's all going to be announced on Tuesday. So, man, we're super excited about this. It will be held at the Link in Nocatee. So big thanks again to Regu. I just can't wait for us to be together and to hear all these amazing stories. Everything from Matt, also to Chris Friedman, to
Jeremy Vaughn,
yeah, Angelo Castroulis, Carlton Robinson from the Chamber. They just have so many great people actually speaking. So we look forward to it. And I hope that you guys can do it. So we do have it out. It's Eventbrite. Connect with us on LinkedIn. We can get the Eventbrite link to you. And definitely RSVP because the tickets are going to be limited.
Yep. Well, that's a wrap, guys. Two recruiters and microphone. Always saying thank you for tuning in, and
see you on the next cast.